Welcome everyone. So I'm Victor Cullen. I'm the academic advisor for Australia Awards, and in addition to that, I have some experience in human resource management, training and development, and part of that today will come through when we talk about developing personal development and network plans, and also accessing a whole range of supports that will help you in your future career planning and other adjustments to life in Australia. So I'll be with you today for the first workshop. So Friday morning. So we're here now running that workshop. And then I'm back with you on Tuesday in the morning where we're going to do a second workshop. And so these two workshops today and also into next week, we'll be looking very much at developing goals and goal setting, and also identifying what we might call skills gaps or skill deficits, and ways in which you can architect or design an environment that helps you identify those skill gaps and close those skill gaps through a whole range of mechanisms, including support networks that you'll have here in Indonesia, but also in particular in Australia. The workshops are also part of a larger group of presenters, and Amanda Schiller is here this morning, and welcome Amanda. Amanda will be joining you next week on the Friday, the 7th of October for workshops which will focus more upon networking and planning of networks. And again, that's about building a set of social supports around you to help you identify your goals, work on your goals, identify skill gaps, close those skill gaps, and the importance of a whole range of individuals and other sorts of mechanisms you can use to close those skill gaps. So the third workshop is a full day workshop, and the workshops with me will be half days today and also next Tuesday. So when we look at the Australia Awards program as a whole, and we look at the broad objectives of the program, as you can see there, the program seeks to achieve the following end of program outcomes. And if you look at the first set under objective 1, you see keywords like Indonesian alumni are using their new knowledge, skills and attitudes to contribute positively in their professional field. And the way I look at that is you're going to get an academic qualification, a master's or a PhD while you are in Australia, and that will give you technical and professional knowledge and skills. But in addition, on that second dot point is Indonesian alumni are going to be using as agents of change their new knowledge, skills and attitudes to contribute positively to their communities. And that's a concept I'm going to talk a little bit about this morning. The idea that with that knowledge and skills, you have the opportunity to be an agent of change at your work level, at your community level, and at your national level as your careers progress. And to talk about the skills required to be an agent of change. And if we look at the second objective there, the program seeks to achieve 3 end of program objectives around Indonesian alumni have or support links with Australian organisations or Australians. And that flows on to Indonesian alumni have links with other Australian Awards alumni or organisations in Indonesia and worldwide. And finally, Indonesian alumni view Australia and Australians in a very positive light. So today's workshop is part of a larger set of program supports being offered by Australia Awards under Pre-Departure Development Impact Planning, PDIP. And if you look at that, you've been selected from a very large and competitive field to win an Australian Award because of your qualifications and your potential to have a contribution to the development of your community and your professional field. And importantly, you've expressed as part of that process in being nominated and selected, and again, congratulations on that award, that you've shown strong commitment to the future development of Indonesia. And the personal development and network planning is part of just getting you to think a lot more about what the goals will be, what your change agency might be, and who will be there to help you support the achievement of those goals. So your selection was also conditional on you agreeing to return home after graduating to apply your new knowledge and skills in your community, workplace, and in contributing Indonesia's social, economic, and developmental challenges, in contributing to the resolution of those. So this PDIP workshop, of which this is part of it, will help you plan and apply the new knowledge and skills through, in particular, this vehicle that we're calling the Professional Development and Network Plan. So the PDIP workshops help you with this process and provides you a tool to help you plan and develop ideas and strategies for how you might contribute to the future. It's important for this process to begin as soon as possible and to continue during your time in Australia. And also that PDIP, in a way, prepares you to start thinking about when you return back to Indonesia, how you might apply those links and skills with Australians and others. So the PDIP under point 4 there also encourages you to explore ways that you might be a change agent upon your return from Australian and with Indonesian people, organisations and communities. So that's a broad statement about what the overall PDIP workshops are about, of which this is part of it. So I won't read those to you, but if you run your eyes down that, you can see that part of what we're going to look at today is beginning point 1, looking at personal development and network plans, of which you received this last night as an email and also as a link, and you're encouraged to bring your laptops along this morning. For those that don't have the laptops, we've got 10 hard copies as well, and also there was a Word version of the plan as well, but we will be able to go in, and part of this morning and also next week and also with Amanda will be to go into that plan and start completing it. Today, my goals will be minimal today, in that I'm just getting us started to get comfortable with the template and to start looking at some of the initial parts of the template. But the strong encouragement will be for you to go back and to complete the template more fully, possibly before you leave Indonesia. And obviously, where you use the phrase, Amanda and I use the phrase, that this is a living document. What that means is you go back to it and you look at it on a regular basis. It's not something you fill in once and put away. It's something that you return to on a regular basis and see how you are progressing in the achievement of those goals and what is helping or hindering you in achieving those goals. And therefore, you can reflect and recollect and bring around you maybe additional supports or knowledge or people or whatever it might be to help you achieve those goals. And in particular, to achieve goals maybe around sets of skills that you want to achieve as part of your study. So part of what I'm going to talk about this morning is the whole thing of adjusting to a new life in Australia, and to start looking at some initial goals under point 3 there. To begin to see yourself as what a change agent might be, and to start thinking about change agency skills, both in your job, in your community, and also at a national level. All of this is part of, I guess, getting a better understanding about yourself. So it's also a personal journey in getting a sense of self-reflection about who you are, what your goals are, what's important to you in life, and in particular, how this qualification that you're going to go in Australia and all the people you're going to get to meet is all part of developing you as well. So it's also, there's a psychological component to this as well. And part of that, we've used the phrase there, is developing emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence. We'll talk about those concepts a bit more this morning, but not in great detail, but just introduce them to you as well. And more on the second workshop that I'll have with you next week, we're going to get into the skills under point 6 there, and looking at skills gaps and what are those skill gaps. Again, according to you, we're not using any third parties here. There's no supervisor, there's no other agent looking at what you think your skills are, but it's you as a personal reflection thinking about, well, here's an honest statement about what my skills are, and here's an honest statement and reflection about what additional skills I need or where the gaps are, and how might I close those gaps. And it does take a bit of time and a bit of thought to actually process this and work it through. That's why it's a living document that you come back to on a regular basis. And finally, under 7, develop some knowledge around how to take up development opportunities whilst at your universities in Australia. And I'll be touching upon that briefly in my workshops with you, but Amanda will take that through more fully with you about what might those opportunities be. So the key part of today we'll be opening up this template. I'm not quite sure when we're going to do that, but that's the link. But let's just park that thought for the time being, but we have a link and we're going to come back to that. So your workshops with Amanda and myself will actually go into that template, we'll open it and we'll start completing that template. But you've got the link, and the link shows up a bit later on those slides as well. But my 4 sessions with you, now that we've sort of got a broad introduction, is to actually talk about, today I'll be doing session 1 and session 2. So we'll be doing some exploratory goal setting, for you, possibly just one or two goals. We'll start embarking upon thinking about what they would be. But as a pre-introduction to that, I want to talk a bit about adjusting to life in Australia and how that adjustment needs to be successful so that you can start defining and achieving some of those goals. And then more in session 2, I'll be talking more about the change agency skills. What are they? How does one become a change agent? And what's the process that you go through in managing change? And you will be doing some reflective exercises as well. And then next week, without going into great detail, we'll be doing session 3 and session 4, which is more about the focus upon the actual skills. What are the skills I've got? What are the skill gaps that I can recognize? And how might I start closing those skill gaps? And with the use of mentors and coaches and additional other supports might be ways in which one can do that. And that's what we're going to explore with you. So let's just talk a little bit about goals and transitions. And then I want to sort of start looking at moving towards the template as soon as we possibly can. So in Australia, you're actually going to be making multiple transitions. You're going to be making a transition to a new culture and to living and working in Australia as a student. But that's the other second key transition, is you're making the transition to being a student. So there's like multiple transitions to life in the larger nation called Australia and to the community of Australia, but also to that campus that you're going to become a part of, and transitioning back to that university. And then also more specifically to the role of being a student and what that role actually requires of you. And there's quite specific statements about what that role is that we'll come into later on. So you're going to leave behind familiar connections and become distance from your social and community networks. But that's not a threat. It's an opportunity, therefore, to open up new networks and new communities that you can learn to engage with and learn to grow as a result of that engagement. So you'll be faced with many new opportunities in Australia to develop these new experiences. You're developing new knowledge and skills through your time in your master's or your PhD's degrees at those Australian universities, but also both on campus and outside of campus, you'll be making lots of new connections, both within and beyond that academic environment. So as part of what we're doing in this personal development and network plan is actually, it's a process of self-assessment and self-reflection. And we're doing this before we go to Australia to get you started. And as I said, reopening opportunities as you arrive in Australia and get engaged in your study to open up the plan and to look at, see how you're progressing on that plan. And so while in Australia, through group discussions with colleagues in a similar position, through your peer networks, through other networks that you'll build, you'll be encouraged to go back and rethink and rework parts of that plan. So all of the discussions we're going to begin today, and also the discussions you'll have in Australia, will start to develop an understanding of the impact of the changes that are happening to you personally as you make that transition to a new culture, to a new set of roles, and also in particular to look at coping mechanisms. How is it best to cope with these changes in a very positive way? And when we look at the work that's done on coping, really there are different ways in which one can cope, but really there are 3 major vehicles we can use for coping. One is we can engage at an emotional level. So we can cry a lot, and we can run away, and we can go into withdrawal, and we can deny what's happening. And actually in the short term, that's not too bad. It actually does help. But that's not solving the major issue of coping with a dramatic change or a major change in roles and in cultural context. The second way in which we cope more effectively is problem solving. And problem solving is a way in which you identify what's causing you anxiety or stress, and you put in place a set of plans that are going to help you solve that problem. And that's where a personal development and network plan can be quite useful. It helps you engage in that more positive problem-solving approach to dealing with stress and anxiety and other issues that might arise in any sort of transition to a new culture or to a new role. And the third part of ways in which we cope with any change is through social networks and social supports. Family, friends, colleagues, others we can bring into our network. The more the better, but it's often the quality of the relationships rather than the quantity, which is important. So having a few quality friends and colleagues and peers at the university or in the broader community or networks back home are very important in helping one cope with the changes that are associated with any transition. So when we look at transitioning to a new culture, and I'm not here to talk in great depth about living and working in Australia, but I am an Australian and I know the culture quite well. But as you transition to any national culture, we know that culture is often described as the way we do things around here. So I look at the Indonesian culture and I get a sense of the way you do things around here. And when you arrive in the Australian culture, especially the university culture, which in a way is like a subculture, you get a sense of this is the way they do things around here, which might be similar or it might be a little bit different from the way I did things back in my home community or my home city. And cultures differ, and they do differ sometimes quite markedly in values and beliefs. And Australian and Indonesian cultures are similar. We are very similar, but we are also different. And the thing about cultural transition is that often you are aware of the differences when you make the mistakes. Okay, and we've all been there when we've traveled where you make some minor change, minor attitudinal difference or minor change in your behavior or minor something that clashes with the new place where you find yourself. And that's often called a cultural shock or a cultural clash. And that's not a big issue, but it's, again, a problem-solving approach, and adjusting to that is the way in which we need to resolve it. So there are some elements of cultural shock and cultural adjustment are just a normal part of transitioning to a new place, a new culture, a new nation. Now, some people have plotted this in a kind of an interesting U-shaped curve. So when we study in new cultures, there will be a normal cultural shock and adjustment, but we learn to adjust and we learn to cope. And most importantly, we learn to thrive. Because ultimately, if you are engaging with the culture enough, you learn the rules, you learn the rituals, you learn the values and norms of that culture. And you actually get to a stage of not total mastery, but of actually thriving and surviving quite well within that cultural context. So when you go to any new context, often there's a honeymoon period. It's a bit like a marriage. And the honeymoon period is where you arrive and you say, wow, this is just like home. They do everything just like home. They sing and they dance and they have language and they drive the car on the same side of the road and they have buses and trains. It's just like home. And so you start making those adjustments at that honeymoon period, and the cultural shock, according to these theories, and it's fairly well tested, is minimal. But then things start going wrong. And you start you start seeing things or hearing values or seeing behaviors or getting confused and getting often a little bit stressed about that. And so there's this cultural shock period, but then ultimately over time, there's adjustment and there's mastery. And that adjustment often is through the problem solving, through gaining social networks, through getting networks and supports to help you understand what's going on. And in Australia, in particular, the university campuses, it's really getting to know other Australians and watching and seeing how they behave and seeing what they value. And obviously in talking to your academics and your professors as well about what's going on. So that sort of mapping, and arguably it's saying that we're looking at sort of culture shock, a honeymoon period of a few months, and then a cultural shock of 3, 4, or 5 months, and then an adjustment period for that. And you can see that it's quite a substantial length of time. So it's real, it happens, it's something that we can all cope with and adjust to, and it's a normal part of life. And explain why this shock occurs. It's normally what we call, if you're a psychologist, you talk about the similarity attraction paradigm. Like, people have this belief that they marry someone who's different from themselves, and that their friends are people who are different from themselves in values and behaviors. That's not true. The frightening thing is we marry someone like ourselves. Our friends are like ourselves. Okay, similarity attraction. So we are attracted to people that look like us, sound like us, and hold our values and behave like we do. And I'm exaggerating a bit here, but that similarity attraction effect is very strong. So individuals have a preference for people who are similar to themselves. We're less favourably disposed to others regarded as being different, and therefore you can get issues around prejudice and discrimination around differences. But individuals are more likely to seek out, enjoy, understand, and want to work and play with and even vote with and want to marry those with whom they share similar characteristics. So, you know, we get this cultural shock because that dissimilarity starts to occur. But cultural growth and mastery only comes when we're open to being with people similar and also dissimilar to ourselves. So here's the challenge. Go to Australia and just don't stick with Indonesian colleagues and Indonesian students. In fact, that's going to happen up to some extent, but then you need to widen that network and to include Australians within that network. And just not Australian students, but students from all over the world. Because all our universities are very multicultural, and we have people from all over the world there studying with the same ambitions and goals that you have to complete their master's degree in those 2 years, or to complete their PhD successfully in those 4 years. So it's a wonderful opportunity during that time in Australia to engage multiculturally with those around you and great friends for life. I have students I've known for 30 or 40 years, and I know students. We had an alumni function the other day at where I work, and we had students that I hadn't seen for 10 years. We just met each other as though it was yesterday. So these are deep and friendly relationships that we have with our alumni in all our Australian universities. So if we get into a little bit of theory without getting too theoretical, noting that I am an academic and I am a researcher as part of what I do, is that Indonesian and Australian cultural values are different. And I'm just going to pick up a couple of ways in which they are different without getting too complex and too carried away with this idea. But if you look at some of the cultural researchers out there, they've done quite a lot of work in mapping cultures and mapping them along different dimensions about how do cultures differ along these different dimensions. And one dimension is called power distance. And this is an idea, as you can read there, the degree to which unequal power in institutions is accepted. That's high power distance. That is, if someone is of status, then I recognize that status and I, in a way, bow or accept their higher authority and their status. That's called high power distance. Or alternative, we have more egalitarian, more equal cultures where there's smaller power distance, where you would walk up to your boss and you'd talk to your boss or your supervisor as though they were your brother or your sister. That's highly egalitarian, or what we call low power distance. So Australia, you'll soon find out very quickly, has got very low power distance nation. That is, we expect equal power in our organisations and we de-emphasise issues of status. Now, that's a bit black and white and not totally true, but it's heading in that direction, okay? So it's not unusual for students to call professors by their first name. It's also not unusual for students to always call their professors professor. It really comes down to a personal decision that you make. But quite often the professors or the lecturers will say, call me Victor or call me Michelle. And I'll actually open and give you that invitation. And I would grab that invitation and call them by their first names if they're actually opening it up and saying, that's the way you should talk to me. So Australia overall has got this low power distance. And again, Indonesia has got a higher power distance where status is recognised a lot more than it is in Australia. The other way in which we can, I guess, differentiate cultures along dimensions is individualism, collectivism. And if we just unpack that, that's the extent to which your identity is determined by personal choices, by personal goals and autonomy. That is what we call individualistic culture, or by the collective, the harmony or the group or the family, if you want to call it. So Australia is labelled as being much more individualistic and having personal autonomy and freedom and I guess doing things to value oneself as quite important. So the self, again, it's a bit black and white, but the self comes before the family or before the community. While in Indonesia, it's more the other direction where the family or the community or the cohesive group comes before the individual. So Indonesia is strongly about the importance of caring for the group and for the collective. And what people have done is they've actually mapped this. And let's just look at the one around collectivism, individualism. And if you look at this in terms of individualism, which is the darker colour, you can see Australia being a more highly individualistic sort of culture, while Indonesia is kind of in that more collectivistic end. All right, so just these are sort of little differences that you can become, and we can also do the same mapping around social distance and around a number of other dimensions of culture. So cultural adaptation can also have its funny side. By that I mean the way in which you can actually cope with any sort of adjustment to another culture is that do it by observing and by seeing what are the rituals and the values and behaviours and trying them out yourself. So if we can get this link to work.
In some Asian cities, it's considered acceptable for a commuter to fall asleep on the shoulder of a stranger. In New York, it's quite a different story. Of course, it could always adapt. We're the global bank that never underestimates the importance of local knowledge. HSBC, the world's local bank.
好容易就簡單啦，就咁就拍頭。大家飲杯，飲杯，飲杯。得啦！大家食啊！好嘢啊！好食啊！湯飲埋先。
The English believe it's a slur on your host's food if you don't clear your plate. Whereas the Chinese feel you're questioning their generosity if you do. At HSBC, we never underestimate the importance of local knowledge. Which is why we have local banks staffed by local people in over 80 countries across the globe. HSBC, the world's local bank.
In America, if you hit a hole-in-one, you're expected to buy everyone a drink. However, in Japan, it's traditional to buy your playing partners expensive gifts.
Same hole.
At HSBC, we never underestimate the importance of local knowledge. HSBC, the world's local bank.
So the whole idea is there are subtle differences, but also you can take advantage of those subtle differences as well. All right, so a cultural adjustment, there you are. So in terms of the issue about adjustment, there's a couple of points here. Cultural shock is normal. We're always making adjustments in life. We can all cope with these adjustments quite well. Sometimes there's an element of stress and anxiety, but with the right problem solving, the right information gathering, the right social supports, everyone copes and everyone survives and even thrives. And in a sense, almost develops a sense of mastery. And another way of putting this is that what we all need to develop when we go and transition to a new location, a new culture, is to have a good level of what we call cultural intelligence. And that helps your adjustment and motivation to learn and to achieve your goals. With good cultural adjustment, you're open to that learning, you're open to that reflection, you're open to sort of thinking about, well, how would I do this behavior in Indonesia, but now how might I engage in that behavior in Australia? So we've all got IQ, we've all got intelligence, which is the ability to learn to deal with new situations. We've got levels of IQ or cognitions or skills that allow us to apply knowledge to actually manage our environment. And we've all got, and we'll mention this later in workshop too, but only briefly, is the idea we've all got a level of what we call emotional intelligence. That is the ability to pick up on our own feelings and the feelings of other people, and to actually understand their wants and their needs, and to actually understand how my own emotions and the emotions of other people affect the way in which we behave. And in addition to that, thirdly, we've all got a level of what we might call cultural intelligence. And that's the ability to adapt and to understand and to adjust to different cultures. And it can give you confidence to operate successfully in a new environment. So arguably, if we look at human behavior and put on a hat, which we might call our psychological hat, all of us have got IQ, and we combine that with a level of emotional intelligence, EQ, with a level of cultural intelligence, and that leads to high performance. So all of us have got an innate ability, which is our IQ. All of us can develop an emotional intelligence, which is the ability to manage our emotions and the emotions of other people and to be more sensitive to that around communication and empathy and showing recognition of others. But also all of us can develop a sense of cultural intelligence. So when you look at this, and this is what I want to do a bit of pen on paper, let's have a play with this. And we're just going to maybe do just a couple of the dimensions. So this is a measure of cultural intelligence. I loaded this up on Blackboard to make sure it actually worked for everyone to see. But let's just look at some of the items to begin with. So this is a cultural intelligence measure that says that you can complete more fully later. It says that how much do I understand others' cultures? And so it's a series of statements with a rating scale of 1 to 5, strongly disagree to strongly agree. And look at the first one. I am conscious of the cultural knowledge I use when interacting with people with different cultural backgrounds. I adjust my cultural knowledge as I interact with people from a culture that is unfamiliar to me. And if we jump down to this one, I know the rules, the vocabulary, the grammar of other cultures. I know the cultural values and religious beliefs of another culture. And if we work forward on that, I enjoy interacting with people from different types of cultures. And this gets more into the communication, which we'll just might do this part of the measure. I change my verbal behavior and accent and tone when a cross-cultural interaction requires it. So I accommodate or I assimilate my speech style and speed of speech. So if we look at a scale of 1 to 5, strongly disagree to strongly agree, let's have a look at that. So pen on paper or find a little place on your notepad. So what rating would you give that? Next item, I use pauses and silence differently to suit different cross-cultural interaction. I will use a pause and a silence differently to suit different cross-cultural interactions. So again, a score of 1 to 5. 1, disagree, to 5, yes, strongly agree, or 4 or 5. I vary the rate of my speaking when a cross-cultural situation requires it, which gets at the idea that I will speak slower or manage the speed at which I'm speaking when a cross-cultural situation requires it. 19, I change my non-verbal behavior when a cross-cultural situation requires it. That is, I'll adjust my use of my hands or my gesture or my smile or my touching behavior when I interact with someone in another culture. And I'll also alter my facial expressions when a cross-cultural interaction requires it. So those items of 16 to 20 are very much about what we call behavioural aspects of cross-cultural adjustment. And again, if you do the full measure, which I'd encourage you to do, but we're just watching time now, that will allow you to get a fuller measure of this. Anyone there? Anyone done those items? If you just add them up, divide them by the number of items, which is, if we go here, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, add those together. And that reflects what's called the capability to exhibit appropriate verbal or non-verbal actions when interacting with people from different cultures. And essentially you add the items up and divide by the number of items. And if the score is 3 or more, it's saying that you're heading in the right direction around exhibiting or showing appropriate behaviours in a range of different cross-cultural contexts. So again, that's just a measure that's there, and there are other dimensions of this. But the important thing is, I think, just to look at those items, and they give you an idea of some of the issues that can arise when you make an adjustment to another culture. Issues around cultural knowledge, understanding different legal and economic systems, rules of speech, understanding there are different marriage systems and arts and crafts vary across nations, understanding the fact that and language and communication in particular can vary as well around what we call the accommodation of one's speech to mirror that of those around you. So one makes adjustments to another culture. We go through a honeymoon period. We go through a period of cultural shock. We adjust. And what the cultural intelligence measure says over those items, when you do that, is an example of how far you are in heading in the direction of having what we call good cultural intelligence skills, and that you can develop these skills a bit further. So with that as a background, I want to talk more now about the personal development and network plan that you've got the links to. And the question is, why do we do such a thing? And what we do is when we do any sort of personal development plan or a reflective process like this, is that we're trying to identify goals, we're trying to identify skills that we have, identify additional skills that we need to gain. And all of this in a way builds upon that cultural intelligence that we talked about before, and even that emotional intelligence by sort of building more knowledge and more skills in each of those areas. We can't do much about the IQ, but we can actually develop the emotional intelligence and also our cultural intelligence as well. So what a personal development and network plan does is identify your skills and your goals and gets you thinking about actually how will I engage in certain strategies to develop more knowledge, to develop more skills, and develop more social supports to help me make that proper cultural adjustment. And a number of quotes here: a goal without a plan is just a wish, and plan your work and work your plan. And this gets at the idea that it's a living document and you keep going back to that document. So a personal development network plan should do a number of things. And if you look at those dot points, it should reflect your aims and goals. So it's, again, a document that you are writing for yourself. It's not a document you're writing for someone else. It should be a fairly truthful document. It's an opportunity to be very honest about, well, what are my goals, short-term and long-term, over a number of contexts, goals at work and goals in Australia and goals for when I come back home. But also it's a good use of your time if you do have a plan. The plans in particular reflect your individual needs and your individual reality. A good plan can set you in the pathway to develop skills and knowledge that actually will enhance your jobs, careers, and life more generally. And it's a cyclical process. We continue to revisit these plans over time. And it's a process of questioning as we work through, and also a process of success when we can tick off a goal and tick off an outcome that's been quite pleasing to achieve. So in the personal development and network planning that we're going to look at this workshop today and next Tuesday, and when Amanda speaks to you next week, next Friday, is really the plan itself is set up in 3 stages. Stage 1 is about identifying your own goals. We're going to start on that this morning. What are the goals you'd like to achieve? When do you want to achieve them? And to look at this idea of a SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And you might have seen that acronym before. And then in the workshops next week with me is talking more about what are these skills and these skill gaps. And then Amanda joins you next Friday to talk much more about the networking and the building component of the plan. What relationships will you need to have to help you achieve your goals, how you develop those networks, and what can you actually offer, because networking is a 2-way relationship. It's just not a 1-way relationship. So let's, I won't dare try another YouTube. I think we might leave that one alone. But let's just talk a bit about, how about opening up your template? Everyone open up their template? All right, thank you. So when you open it up, you should get to that page that we're seeing in the middle. So let's start filling this in. So the first part of it is, as you can see on that page. And so what we're on about here is to actually make sure that we understand the personal context before defining aspects about you. So really, who are you? What are you passionate about? What's your identity? What might influence your goals? And these are really big questions to actually address. So you can just sort of start sketching out maybe what a reply would be here, and what are the different roles and responsibilities that make demands on your time and energy. So this is all about just introducing yourself in a way to yourself. So here's about a statement about who I am. So let's just spend 5 minutes getting started on that. So save that. Now what I'd like you to do, just for a couple of minutes, is turn to a person next to you and say, what did you feel like? What was that? What were the feelings you had as you did that? How did you feel as you did that? And you could do it at 2 levels. You could say, well, here's some thoughts I put together, but also what were you feeling and thinking as you did this? Okay, a pair. Just look for a pair, have a chat. Turn to each other, have a talk. Yeah, all right, okay. So this is a very normal process of doing a personal development and network plan. Again, if you do any leadership programs or management programs, this is a big part of what you would do. So clearly, it's a great opportunity to exchange thoughts and feelings. I'm just going to go back a step, but this is the next part of your plan. So if you can just move forward, it should now move into the goals part of the plan. Okay, and so in terms of life goals, or even specific, everyday goals, we often use this little acronym called SMART or SMART-ER. So again, a number of you, given your head nods, have seen this before. And I won't show the video, but the video is there, which talks about why these goals are important. And it shows, I guess, ways in which you can be examples for each of the letters that we looked at here. So we know that goals motivate individuals. If you look at psychology and you look at what psychology talks about, it says that we are very goal oriented. No matter what culture you belong to, we are motivated positively by goals, but those goals have to be of a particular type. That is, they can't be too general and they can't be too far into the future. So they've got to have a certain set of features. And what the SMARTer statement does is help us write goals which are likely to be more likely to be achieved in the short and the longer term. So it says that we're motivated by goals which are fairly specific. And so the more specific, the better. So, and then that are measurable. That is, we know that we can somehow measure the achievement of that goal. So clearly going to Australia to complete a master's or a PhD, you could write a specific goal about that, and you know it is measurable when you complete that goal because you're going to graduate with your master's degree or graduate with your PhD. So you can see how you can measure that. And also you could actually be quite specific. You could measure that goal achievement by your success with each subject you do. So in the master's by coursework over your 12 subjects or 16 subjects, each subject you complete is a specific goal and will give you a measurable statement that I'm now achieving 1/12 or 2/12 or 1/16 or 2/16 of my goal, depending upon how many subjects you're doing. The same with the PhD students, and we talked about yesterday the idea of milestones 1, 2, and 3. Achieving milestone 1 might be your first goal in terms of your PhD. Once you complete milestone 1, clearly your next goal is milestone 2, and there's a lot of specific features and learnings and knowledge and workshops and things that need to be written and researched to achieve that milestone 2. So specific, measurable, actionable, that is, I can take actions that is under my control, not the control of other people. It's relevant to who I am and what I'm trying to achieve. And obviously these degrees and these qualifications are. It's time bound, that is, you set periods of time, 2 years, 1 year, 1 semester, whatever it might be. So you are setting a particular time frame for each of those goals. So if it's passing a particular subject, then it's a 14-week goal. And it's about passing those four subjects that you're doing in semester 1 and the 4 subjects you're doing in semester 2, or it might be submitting particular assignments. And as I'll talk about this afternoon, when you're doing a master's by coursework, you could be doing up to 36 to 42 pieces of assessment in the 2 years. That's frightening. But you will achieve it. And again, you can set that as a set of goals, and you're achieving those goals as you go along. And then the SMARTer part of this is that you need to evaluate the achievement of those goals, and you need to reward yourself. You need to celebrate the achievement of goals. So what the template does is use the SMART and the SMARTer statement to actually get you thinking about goals. But what it also does is to think about these goals at 3 levels, importantly. And this goes back to the nature of your being a scholar and what we're trying to achieve here as change agents. So it's taking your technical and broader skills, and some of these will now be cultural knowledge that you'll collect and develop as a result of your 2 or 4 years in Australia, to actually work on goals across 3 different realms. Your career, which is often the more technical goals, your community, which is often a combination of technical and national values, and at a country level as well, which might link to the strategic plan for the nation, and how might you play a role as an agent in achieving those national goals. So for each of these different realms of your life, we'll encourage you to think about 2 different timeframes. One is what you would like to achieve 5 years from now, and what you'd also like to achieve further into the future, say in 10 years from now. So it's SMART or SMARTER as a way to start thinking about, as you write a goal, trying to be specific, trying to be realistic about that goal. You know, you're not an Olympic swimmer, you know, you're not a marathon runner, but you are a bright, hardworking student who in 2 years will achieve this master's and in 4 years will achieve this PhD. So it's actionable, it's relevant, it's got a time period, and also it's got different levels around career, community, and country. So why don't we now move back to the template, and we're just going to spend 10 minutes on this and then have some morning tea is the plan. So as we go to morning tea, just a couple of thoughts as we sort of wrap up this first session. I don't want to make too big a deal out of it, but look, there's always a transition. You know, every day we make transitions. I'm sitting here on day 2 making transitions back into your culture and into your way of life, even though I've been here probably 20 times before. Each time it's a different transition. And probably each time the cultural shock is minimized because I learn what the skills are and I'm more knowledgeable and therefore more able to adapt as I adjust to this different environment. But all of us can adjust and all of us adjust very successfully. It just takes a bit of time and effort. And a personal development and network plan is a nice explicit statement and a nice supporting anchor that you can use as you make these adjustments. So cultural adjustment and is a normal, and as is most adjustments in life, and nearly all of us will be very successful in doing that. And we can learn, and it helps our adjustment by being very open-minded. So watching ourselves and watching others is important. And you'll just develop and grow that cultural intelligence over time. So a reminder when you find time to go back and to complete that measure. Towards being open to learning, we need to be open, reflective, and we need to watch ourselves and to learn by watching others as well. We've started working on the professional development and network plan, sketching out some initial thoughts. An important part of that is to understand one's individual context and then to start finding some goals 5 and 10 years using SMART or SMARTER as a way of just defining and refining what those goals might be. So there's a statement there are dreamers and there are planners, and the planners make their dreams come true. So this is, again, the importance of having a plan like this. So as we go to morning tea, what I'd like you to do is to take a thought about one of your goals and to make that the topic of conversation as you have tea or coffee, all right? I want you to do a bit of work as we have morning tea. So you're talking about work, and I want you to talk about and share at least one of your goals with at least one or more people as we have tea or coffee. Now, I'm just going to do a bit of a quiz. So I want to actually check in with you as to what we've picked up so far. All right. So I'd like you to turn into groups of 6, you know, something just like this 3 would turn to that 3 and that 3 would turn to that 3. You got the logic. So turn around. What I'd like you to think about is why. I want you to then come back to me, and I might pick just randomly groups. So raising a bit of the stress here, randomly I'm going to select groups and say, what have we talked about so far? So I want you to come back to me and say, why do we need to do a personal development and network plan? So what did the group talk about that? What were the feelings in the group about whether this is why is this a good idea? So why do we need to do a plan? Why is this a good idea? And any particular questions that the group has about doing such a plan. So at the very early stages, it's a living document. It's a document we'll keep coming back to. We'll see how we go this morning and as to whether we can find some more time to work on it. But let's create a bit of chaos in the room to begin with. Okay, we've just had some morning tea, so we're full of food, full of energy. Turn around, groups of 3 into 6, okay? Why do we need to do personal development network planning? What's going to be good about it? And also any questions. Okay, let's do this for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Turn around, have a chat. So we've begun the morning by talking about, personal development and network planning, and the idea that all of us are making, in a way, we're going into the unknown. We're going into a new, let's call it a new world. It's just down the hill, down to Australia, but we're going into a new place, a new cultural context, and there's always a transition. And we've talked about the advantages of planning and planning around goals. Well, firstly, understanding your personal context, who you are, what your goals and ambitions are. And then we're going to move from that and talk a lot more about building the networks to support the achievement of those goals. So I've already put the question to you already. Now, what is valuable about doing a plan? So I'm going to maybe make one statement and then turn to one of our scholars, and then just rotate around the room, and people can put up their hand and volunteer. If you don't volunteer, I'm going to make you volunteer. That's what we do in Australia. We make you volunteer. So let me just make this statement. In life, I use this phrase, we get lost in activity, busy, busy, busy. And when you get to Australia, you're going to become even busier, because once you join a university and we start looking at 13-week blocks for study, and as I'll say this afternoon, 24 to 36 pieces of assessment plus exams, you are a busy person. And now's the opportunity, as well as when you get to Australia, to stop, pause, reflect, and plan what these goals might be. So because you get lost in activity, every day becomes the same, and you wonder where you're going. So let's start rotating around the room. One of our scholars, she said something interesting, and I want to, if you don't mind sharing that. And then we might just look at some other volunteers. Thank you.
So when we are discussing about this, my name is Alexandra. And I actually have multiple roles in my life. When I said to our friends here that for myself, for example, it's really easy to getting dragged into those multiple role activities, because I am a wife, I am a mother, I am a lecturer, I am also a member of a community, a church, and something like that. So this kind of planning activity is really a good stop for me to just stop and think about myself, what I'm gonna do with my life, because it will affect all of other people in my life. So I need to really sure that this is what I want. Going to Australia is really good, what I want. Getting a PhD is really what I want, because it will affect my husband, my son, my university. And this rigorous planning is really important to keep me on track. And when I believe that all of the PhD candidates already imagine what kind of life we will have for another 4 years, and it will be a dark moment in there. And I believe all of us will need this goal statement to remind us why we are doing this, why we are make ourselves suffer in the next 4 years.
Thank you very much. Okay, well done. Thank you. All right, I always like the people that sit up the front of the room. So this is my next group of volunteers. Okay, why do we need to do planning?
Thank you for choosing me. So in line with Alexandra, we think that this will beneficial for us to keep on the track. Yeah. Because as me as a ladies, as a female PhD candidate, we are not thinking about me, but we have to thinking about our family, how they can adapt. But also, as always, it's about the distract factors. So based on this plan, we can realize you come here for one goal. So you have to get a focus, and you have to evaluate it. How come you come so far, and what is the barrier, and what is the encourage factor to be here? So I think to get on the track is the key of this plan.
Well done, thank you. All right. Now, just to be gender balanced, we need one male. There's a male. Oh, he's putting his hand up. I'm a male, and I'm going to talk. Good, thank you. And your reflections on why we need to plan? Thank you.
This group is actually very interesting, because I'm the only one who is not a civil servant.
Yep.
So I can do whatever I want. Meanwhile, this group, I feel sorry for them, because they are at the mercy of their, atasan. So yeah. So from what I've heard, there's so much discussion about, that about job position and how volatile or basically at the mercy of their atasan, for these people, not me. But one thing that came up is that from Mbak Mili, is that we need to think about what we do instead of the job position, what creative methods that can be done to to better ourselves, to do something better in our job when we come back to our home organization. So instead of thinking about the job, we need to think about what we can do, whatever that job title might be. And then once again, I think we need to put emphasis on that this is a living organism, I'm sorry.
A living document.
Yeah, like the living document. It's
yeah.
a living document. It's not something that is very constant, because when we change every day, and there might be something that come across our mind, and we can just write it down. And we grow every day. And I think that this plan should grow just like we do. And one thing that I think that once again for these people, we need to not think about the job, the home organization, but we need to think about our personal development as well. Not just like what we can do to our job, what we can do to the home organization, but what we can do to ourselves as well. To be more individual, I guess, and to once again to our community, because once again we are very multifaceted. We are part of, like Alexandra has just told us, we are very multifaceted. We live as a family, member of community, member of organization. And we need to think more about that.
Thank you. Well done. Thank you. And again, we need to find one more male.
My name is Mufti, and this group, we are all from the public sector, but with different area. So 2 of us are from the ministry, 2 of us are from the university, and 1 from local government. So I think what we're facing, I think there is there is an uncertainty, of course, that of course we want to plan, we want to have like after we graduated, what we wanted to do, what job position that we are expecting. But it also we also face uncertainty from our organization that of course we wanted to be there, but the decision is still depends on everything the local government would decide. Our government would decide. So, but I think the plan that we made, I think is very good things to keep us on track, and also because it could be a strong argument on when we graduate what we want to be, and we can be. It's a strong argument for us to our office, to the office. But also we also have to take note that because there is still uncertainty on what on what the future will hold for us, we also need to be adapted, or we also have. For me personally, I have to create an alternate goals or a contingency plan on if this plan doesn't work for me personally.
Thank you very much. Well done. All right. So you've got me reflecting, and I'll talk more about this afternoon, that the universities themselves have got lots of what we call career counsellors and job search centres. And in particular, they help develop your resumes, which I think is important as part of this as well. But also they develop reflective exercises to keep thinking about goals at the university, careers and career planning, and also contributions you might make to the wider community. So again, I'll talk about this afternoon, but in particular, I think it's very important early on to get to know where these career hubs are and where these centres are within each of your campuses, because they're really good people to talk to. And sometimes the faculties that you will join will have these individuals there as well. I know I come from a business faculty, and our students actually demand this. They demand that we provide services around jobs, careers and counselling. And we actually do that, as well as the university provides that as well. But we've got money. We're a business school. Business school's got lots of money. We can afford it. But if you're in the School of Anthropology or Social Work or Arts, they don't have any money. And so people then rely upon the central sources. Okay, so as we talked about in the introductory part of this morning, one goal of the program is to get you thinking about, thinking about you as a change agent. And you've already started looking at establishing goals for your career, but also establishing goals around a community or also around a nation. And often it's those aspects in particular, but it can also be your job and your organization. How might you create positive and meaningful change and significant change when you return? And often your technical skills are part of that, having developed a master's degree or a PhD qualification, but also it's the broader social, emotional, and other skills that you might have developed, cultural skills you might have developed as being part of that 2 or 4 year period in Australia. So I want to talk a little bit more then about how we might think about ourselves as being a change agent, and how that change agent role might also then fit into some of these goal statements that you start to work up, and also to start to think about change agent skills in terms of maybe what skills do I have now, what skills might I develop further over the next 2 or 4 years over my study program at the universities. So the big issue around change agency is that as a change agent, you are trying to get people to think differently or to behave differently. And this could be individuals, it could be groups, it could be communities, or it could be nations. So it's about getting people, and often people are resistant to change. If you think about yourself personally, and if I think about myself personally, it's often hard to change human behavior. We know, for example, if you encourage people to lose weight or to stop smoking cigarettes or to exercise more, about 50% of people will be successful and about 50% of people will not. So a majority of people find it very hard. And even those who find it successful, in the longer run, often return back to the old behavior. So quite often individuals like us find it hard to change because we engage in habits. We like the way things are. We like a sense of control and order and predictability. And if you think about the way you've had today, you probably did the same thing today as you did yesterday. I know I did, much the same. And we like that control and order and predictability because that allows us to manage stress. We like fairly static environments, and that's just a feature of human behavior. So we have our habits, and often the habits are lost. Change creates a loss of security, loss of stability and security and certainty. And often there can be other issues about the fact that we change might mean that there's an economic threat here, or it could be a social threat where I lose social standing or social status, or I might lose some sort of financial or economic factors that make my life a bit better. It's the fear of the unknown, and we've talked earlier on about going to a new culture, a new nation, and Australia is very similar in many ways, but we've really highlighted in a very general way the fact that there'll be things that'll be different as well. And university life as well as another adjustment in itself, let alone adjusting to being a member of the Australian community and the Australian nation over that 2 or 4 years. Because even universities are like a subculture that you have to join. Their own rules and regulations and their own ways in which we expect people to behave. And quite often people are resistant to change because they lack knowledge or skills. So you've got someone operating here right now in this level of knowledge and skills, and you're now asking them to move over here. And often that transition requires different knowledge and different skills and different ways of viewing the world. And that's hard to make that transition. So we've got to actually prepare people and work with people to get them ready and get them confident to make that change. So individuals find change very, very hard, and therefore the change agent role is critical in persuading and encouraging and influencing people to consider those changes. Also, change agents identify and manage resistance not only at an individual level, but at an organizational or a community level or a national level. So we find that communities or nations or organizations, these collectives are often reluctant to change for a whole range of reasons, including resources are allocated differently. So one department or one division gets more or less, but quite often less resources. They are therefore resistant to change because they're going to have less of resources to allow them to do their job. There are structures and laws and strategies that need to be rethought or restated. These could be organizational policies and rules and procedures. They could be national laws that need to change. So often organizations are very slow and very thoughtful often, but slow and thoughtful, and sometimes resistant to creating that change. There are cultural barriers. Things are treasured, and often you don't know things are treasured until they're threatened. But there are rules and rituals and ways of behaving in organizations or communities. The change agent needs to be aware of those. And the key one I find is the lack of urgency. There's no real desire, no sense of urgency about why we need to change. For instance, we've all just been through COVID, and we've still got the after effects of COVID. COVID created that sense of urgency, and we had tremendous change in communities and organisations and in individual behaviour in response to COVID. Here you are sitting, individuals wearing masks. Okay, that is not something we contemplated 3 years ago, but you've engaged in that behavioural change because there was a sense of urgency. And that sense of urgency was well committed in many places where it was not only a threat to you, but it was a threat to others, to family and community if you did not wear a mask. And that's what most organisations and most nations that have been successful in handling COVID have done. They've realised that we need to communicate as change agents the impact upon the individual, but also the impact that that individual's behaviour will have upon other people. And that's why people have changed, especially in cultures like your own, which are much more collectivistic and a lot more family oriented. That willingness to care for others has been a very important driver for change. So you've got to have the right skills if you're going to be a change agent. And what we're trying to do, and what we'll be doing through your technical qualifications at the universities and also through other development programs that you might do, is to get you to think about what those change agent skills will be. Now, I can list a long menu of what these skills are, but these are some of them. A lot of it is around communication skills, and we know that good change agents, because there are issues of resistance and reallocation of rewards and reallocation of resources, that are quite often there's issues around what we might call destructive conflict, but we're trying to get a more positive conflict. So rather than win-lose, it's more what we call win-win. And a good change agent understands the importance of good or even superb communication skills, ways in which they need to manage conflict, ways in which they just need to be very planful in planning and managing projects and having almost a linear approach, step 1, step 2, step 3. This is the way we're going to manage this change process. Managing resistance we've talked about. But also we've mentioned along the way this morning the fact that good change agents are culturally aware and they're emotionally intelligent. Culturally aware of the fact that there are particular rituals, rules, values that are important that we need to be recognised as we go through a cultural change, but also emotional intelligence, that they are managing the feelings and the emotions and the concerns that they have, but also that other individuals have. And when we look at the program itself, the AAI alumni attributes that will support you being change agents include the following. So when we look at the qualities of our alumni, and this is what we are aiming to develop within yourselves, and also both qualities and skills, and you run your eyes down that, we're seeing a whole range of what you might call personal and interpersonal and intrapersonal qualities that we are developing, and skills as well that vary from the technical skills that you'll develop just through your university qualifications, because you learn a lot of skills around communication and planning and writing and doing research and technical expertise, which will be valuable. And part of that are problem-solving skills that you pick up just through the nature of what you do in terms of the intellectual rigor of the university work and university assignments. But then these emotional and interpersonal skills that you develop. And again, through the study experience, you'll be doing a lot of teamwork exercises and a lot of group exercises within your assessment at university. You'll be dealing with people from other cultural backgrounds, and you'll be managing issues around solving problems and working together. There'll be importance around communication skills, because this is just not skills around oral presentations and written presentations that you'll need to make, but also in interactions with other people and influencing other people within your groups and teams. Strategic planning skills and also project management skills. So there's a very strong overlap between the skill set and the qualities that we are developing through the program, and also what a change agent are, what his or her qualities and his or her skills are. And so there's this very, very strong correspondence between the two. And again, the planning that you're going to do through the personal development and network planning will be very, very useful to start identifying what change agent skills you already have, if we look at this as sort of a list, and also what change agent skills do you need to continue to develop. So if we move along with that, there's a lot of evidence that when we do change to individuals or organizations or communities or even nations, that we need to go through, I guess, a number of stages. And this is one popular model that I often use in some of the work and some of the consultancy I do. The first thing is that what a change agent does is that he or she creates a climate for change. The word I like to use is that we kind of unfreeze. So think of organizations or communities of nations or even individuals as like a block of ice. They're unchanging, they're solid, and they are in control. And what you want to do is to unfreeze that, make it more fluid so it's willing to move. And so what you are doing as a change agent is developing skills around communicating the need for change. So often what's in it for me, or what's in it for the community, or what's in it for the nation if we actually change to this different state, to this desired state. So you need to create that sense of urgency. Some people, where it's really, really urgent, call it the burning platform. Here's the burning platform. We've got to get off this platform. We've got to do something about it. But once you've got that sense of urgency and people are starting to understand why we need to change, look at COVID, why we needed to change. COVID made that very clear. We then need to build teams or coalitions or groups of people who think the same, also agree that we need to create change. And so a good change agent is good at building teams and then establishing at this unfreezing stage a sense of vision about what do we want to achieve in this change in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years. So that goal planning is also part of this process. So a good change agent is good at unfreezing. He or she creates the urgency, builds good teams, has good interpersonal skills about doing that, good communication skills, and is somewhat visionary about establishing plans for the next 5 or 10 years. So that's the unfreezing. And also what a good change agent does is then actually help the change occur. And so they do this by communicating for buy-in, that is getting people to actually commit to the change and actually say, yes, I see this as a personal or community or an organizational or a national goal. They then enable action. So once they get high enough, I guess, in the hierarchy, what a good change agent does is give the resources or give the permission to people to actually engage in change activities. Because quite often change to an organization or a community or a nation is not just one big thing, it's lots and lots of minor projects, lots and lots of initiatives that are put in place, lots and lots of activities. So you have lots and lots of change agents leading each of those activities, enabling and supporting the action. And what we do, because we know human behavior is such that we get demotivated if we're not rewarded. If you reward us and give us a sense of, a bit like the SMART goals, realistic, achievable, you know, what have I actually done? That we need to actually promote short-term wins. So good change agents are very good at establishing, okay, here are our rewards in 3 months, or here's how we know we'll be successful in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, or 5 years. A bit like the goal setting that you're doing in your personal development plan. And finally, what good change agents do, so that's kind of unfreezing, that's movement or change. And then what good change agents do is they help communities and nations and teams refreeze, lock the change in. Now, why do we need to do that? It's because we like to go back to the old way of doing things. We're habitual, okay? As I said, 50% of efforts to make change fail, all right? So we need to lock it in. And how do we lock that in? Is that, well, we encourage people not to give up and we make the change stick in a number of ways. Nations make that change stick by bringing new laws or new legislation. Organizations make that change stick by making different ways in which they might select, recruit, reward, or motivate individuals in the organization, okay? And in teams, we make the change stick by changing the rules or the norms around team behavior about what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior within that team or group. So what a change agent does is he or she is aware of the fact that change is a process, and the change is, you know, somewhat linear, although it's not ideally linear, because life is much more messier than this. But we are very good at unfreezing, creating the desire for change, making the change happen, and then locking the change down because people go back to the old ways of doing things. So what I want to pull this together. So what do we have here? Here we have a list of skills. If we look on the right-hand side, skills of a change agent or skills of the AII alumni. And these are very strongly related to each other. So as you graduate from the 2-year or the 4-year qualification, we're developing a whole range of alumni skills. But also, if we add to that skill set the idea that change agents also do the following, they're very good at this unfreezing, movement of change and refreezing. I wanted you to think about that as an additional set of skills. They are overlapping, but there's some additional things here as well. Now, here's the activity. Given that, I want you to now start thinking about how you have behaved as a change agent or how you have seen others behave as a change agent. So here's the activity. Think about a time when you were part of a planned change. So this might have been in it could be a family setting, changing the habits or behaviors of your family, of your children. Let's not talk about adolescents, but changing the behaviors of children. It could be changing the behaviors of an individual, but more likely changing the behaviors of people in an organization, in a team, or in a community, or even you could talk about something at a national level. It's up to you as to what you might, but think about what comes to mind now about a change event that you are somewhat expert on. You could make some comment about that. So you might have to, it might have been at home, it might have been in the community, or could most likely have been in an organizational setting, given what most of you have been doing recently. How well was this change managed by you as the change agent or by others as change agents around the skills shown in the previous set of slides around skill or around the stages of change? So I've got those earlier slides, which give you skill sets or qualities. And what I'd like to think about was applying that as like a checklist to ask these two questions. The first question is, what skills or stages were done well? So think about that change event that you were involved in or you watched others lead, and then go back and have a look at this skill set here. So what skills amongst these were being used? Okay. Or how well, and you know, what skills amongst these were used well, and what stages maybe over here did they also do well? And the reverse of that is what skills or stages could have been done better? So I'm getting to think about this. It could be you as a person, or it could be you as an observer of others as change agents. All right. So we're going to do this in groups of 3. And what I'd like you to do is develop like a conversation. So you'd say, okay, it was last year, it was March, it was in the middle of COVID, and my supervisor engaged as a change agent, or I engaged as a change agent. I think they did this really well. And you'd go back to that checklist that we showed on the AII alumni, or the other 8 stages going up the stairway. And then you might say, okay, they did that well, but also I think they could have done these other things better. They were lacking skills in these other areas. And then to sum up around that. And in a way, it's getting to think about what change agents do. And then what I'm hoping is that reflection, again, getting lost in activity, slowing down and thinking about these sort of reflective activities. What might that then say for my personal goals as we go on to the template later on, okay? All right, groups of 3. So look, so the point about this is that I'm getting you to think about a personal experience, again, to reflect upon a personal experience where you might have been the change agent or someone, or you've observed a change agent at work, and that he or she has had to create some change, either quite often it's at a team level, change the way a team operates, or at an organizational level, but as well at a community. And often we have our politicians, I guess, operating as change agents in communities, or community figures or community leaders, and that at the national level as well, we have change agents. So what I'm getting to think about, well, what do they do that makes it go well, to make change go really well? But also when it doesn't go that well, what seem to be the shortcomings, all right? So I've nominated, we have a volunteer group over here, and then I'm going to find one other volunteer group, then I'm going to wrap it up, and then we're going to go for lunch. Thank you.
So from our groups, we actually share some things. We haven't covered up for everyone to tell the stories, but from the common things is that we all work for the community, like most of us. And then what we cover was we're making changes, and that change happened in small communities, but it has a big impact. So the skills that actually we are applying mostly are like creative thinkings, and then how we do like managing people, and do mostly like the communication skills too.
Okay, right.
And then the things that we find that we are lacking of is mostly about how to manage that thing or the change for a longer time. So mostly it's just like a one-time programs or something that is hard to manage for a long time. So we're still, the things that we wanted to do better was like how to actually made it sustainable for a long time.
Okay. And if you had a motto, like a summary, like a one sentence to summarize what makes change go well, what would it be? I know, is it, you mentioned communication. Is that what makes change?
Oh, so
like if you had to write a motto on the fridge or put it over your bed at night and said, here's a motto about being a change agent, what would it be?
I think it would be like communication is the key, and trying hard is something that you need to do.
I love that. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you. Well done. Thank you. All right. And I'm looking for a male volunteer. Do you get the gender balance? Looking for a male?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Basically, our team, we talk about the change in our working place. And as for my own case, I did like, I made a step-by-step screenshot that can be used for newcomers. So every time I was working at bank at the time. So when we want to key in the information into the system, it's quite complicated, especially for newcomers. Therefore, I had an idea to make this one step-by-step book, something like that. It is printed. And then, so every newcomers can use it as a guidance. And this idea came from my own experience when I was a newcomer as well there. I faced so many difficulties to catch up with the working environment there. So that's it.
Okay. So what you're displaying was skills around what planning, project management, taking your own personal experiences and putting them down into like a procedures manual. Can you name some of those skills? It wasn't so much communication, but it was what? Planning.
Maybe it's more like technical skills. Because
skills.
It's very technical actually.
Right. So you had technical knowledge that you then said this technical knowledge needs to be shared with newcomers.
Yes.
And I'll write like a newcomer manual to help them come up to speed a lot quicker.
Yes. And this manual is also being reviewed every twice a year.
Okay. Now, if we take the other side, and if you personally critique what you did, what could have been done even better?
Maybe this manual can be used in the training for
maybe it could have been promoted more to other
part of curriculum groups. For induction training.
Was it picked up as part of a larger training process? It was. Oh, well, therefore you had a good success. And if you had a motto for change, what would it be?
To create change, I think the first one is technical, because you have to know exactly the problem and how to solve it, and then the communication skill as well, how to deliver it to others so they can understand what our thinking is.
Well done. Good. And that's an important point, that having technical skills is often then seen as giving you like a reputation or a brand that you are to be trusted, you are to be believed. So the advice you give because you have technical expertise is good advice or sound advice. So again, technical training, technical expertise, having a master's or a PhD degree is a tick that you've got that technical expertise. But once you've got the technical expertise, you also need to have that non-technical expertise, and that non-technical expertise are the communication skills, the conflict resolution skills, the skills in planning and organizing and so on, and building a team. They're the other skill sets that we need to think about. We'll talk more about that next week when we look at skills and skill gaps. So some points to remember from this discussion around being a change agent. Again, it's a very early discussion, but one that I want you to start thinking about. Imagine yourself or see yourself when you look at the Australia Awards attributes, to start seeing yourself just not as a technical expert, but also developing those non-technical skills. And also in particular about being a change agent, an agent for change, either within a a family setting, a work team, an organizational setting, a community setting, or even at a national level. That people, communities, and nations actually will change and can change if a number of things. One is that they see the intended change worthwhile, and that really you've created that, that the fact that this new reality, this new way of doing things, or this new way of thinking is actually more valuable and actually will make your life easier for as an individual, a team, an organization, or a community. So you've got to really be good at influencing people to show them how the change will be better than what we are currently like. Secondly, if they can believe they'll be successful in doing their role. So people, to create change, you need to actually make sure they've got the knowledge and the skill. When we talked about resistance earlier on, one reason why people resist is that I don't have the skills or I don't have the knowledge to actually do what you are asking me to do this job differently or to play that role differently. So you've got to give people the knowledge and the skills. And that's often where a change agent needs to work with a technical department or a HR department or a marketing department to actually help people develop those skills. The amount of effort required personally is reasonable. So people will actually go with you and create change and listen to you as a change agent if the goals that you are setting are moderately difficult but not impossible. Okay, they're not too easy, they're not too hard, there's something in between. Now, how do you find out what is that in between? It's through communication, it's building rapport, and it's getting an understanding of the context they are working in. It takes time, but you can do that. So moderately challenging goals. And this goes generally for human behavior, that all of us are motivated more by moderately difficult rather than impossible or too easy goals. Fourthly, that as long as you're going to support me. So change agents are successful when they build supports around the people going through the change. And they'll be supported and not meet unmanageable obstacles in doing their part. So both the change agent will be supported by higher authorities and by their team, and their team members or the community will feel they're being supported as they engage in the change process. Fifthly, they believe that if they try and fail, the consequences are manageable. That is, if I try and fail, I'm not going to lose my job, or I'm not going to lose my authority within the community, or I'm not going to lose my position within the nation. That I'm actually going to try something. It's going to be a pilot. It's going to be an attempt to change things from the way they are to something different. And we're going to do our best, but not all the time do we actually achieve the ultimate goal. Maybe we get 70%, but 70% will be good enough. And then from 70%, we'll see if we can build to 90% to 100%. So it's often there is a gradation, a stepwise achievement of the goals. And sixthly, not five again, they believe that if they try and succeed, they'll be recognized and rewarded. That is, people will engage in change if they believe, I'll get some recognition, I'll get some, my job will be easier, or the lives of our community will be better as a result of the going through and actually embracing this change. And when we have skilled change agents with the type of skills that the program like this will be developing, then we're more likely to have these successes, because quite often change agents themselves don't succeed because they lack the skills. So let's leave it at that. Thanks very much. Thank you to the technical guys. Thanks, everyone.